Good evening, and I'm pleased to welcome you to tonight's very special program. My name is Scott Stroh, and I'm proud to serve as Executive Director of George Mason's Gunston Hall. First, I want to recognize and thank the student leaders who inspired and planned this program. These leaders begin each of their meetings with a land acknowledgement. This moment, when they recognize the original inhabitants of the land where they are convening, has proven very powerful to me. And before continuing, I would like to honor this tradition and offer my own land acknowledgement. Tonight, I am joining you from Gunston Hall. This land was originally home to the Dogue people, who spoke the Algonquin language and may have been affiliated with the Nanticoke people on the eastern shore of Maryland. From this place, they gathered fish and they grew corn. To continue, our mission at Gunston Hall is to stimulate the exploration and the understanding of principles expressed by George Mason in the 1776 Virginia Declaration of Rights. This document states that all men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights. These rights include life, liberty, happiness, and safety. The power of these ideas is not bound by time, and the fulfillment of our mission includes the exploration of the continuing arc of justice necessary for all to fully access these promises of equality. Our framework for this process is to understand Mason's and our own ideas, choices, and actions. This process requires the recognition of real and potential contradictions, but this process begins with ideas and the expression of ideas in furtherance of a cause. So it was with great interest that I read a blog posting by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation this past August, highlighting a Watershed Outdoor Bill of Rights written by the participants in their student leadership program. I read this blog with interest because of the reference to a Bill of Rights, but also because I believe that clean water and air, fair and equal access to a clean environment, and opportunities for all to participate in decisions about that which impacts our natural world and the places we live are inherent rights. In reading this blog, I was also motivated to take actions that would advance the ideas expressed by these student leaders. Immediately, I shared thoughts about how we could do so with our team at Gunston Hall, and all were excited about the potential of a collaboration with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. As a result, we find ourselves together this evening, appropriately on National Bill of Rights Day, to learn from some amazing student leaders who have thoughtfully expressed their ideas about rights, equality, and justice specific to the Bay and the outdoors in their very own Bill of Rights. I am confident that what you see, hear, and learn tonight will inspire and energize you, just as it has us. Before concluding, I want to thank a few folks who have also helped make this program possible: the Board of Regents of Gunston Hall and the Commonwealth of Virginia, Melanie Johnson, Gunston Hall's Director of Marketing and Public Relations, Rebecca Martin, Gunston Hall's Director of Education and Guest Experiences, William C. Baker, President of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Tom Ackerman, Vice President of Environmental Education at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Rick Mittler, the Virginia Student Leadership Coordinator for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and most importantly, all of the Watershed-wide student leaders. Thank you, and it's now my honor to turn the program over to Rick Mittler from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Enjoy.
Thanks so much, Scott. And thank you to everyone at Gunston Hall for having us here today. And a huge thank you to all of you for tuning in. Again, my name is Rick Mittler. I'm the Virginia Student Leadership Coordinator with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And I just want to give you a quick snapshot about what is CBF. So CBF, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, is a nonprofit established in 1967 with that iconic three-word mission: save the Bay. So we work across the watershed and the airshed to ensure the protection and conservation of our national treasure, the Chesapeake Bay. But you may be thinking to yourself, how does CBF really save the Bay? Well, we do it in a couple different ways. We do it through education. So we educate students, teachers, legislators, parents, and really anyone who will listen to us. And our goal is not only to inform people about why it's important to save the Bay, but also what folks can do to help. Through education, through the Chesapeake Bay Foundation's education program has really provided me the privilege and the opportunity to work with the amazing group of next generation environmental stewards that you're going to meet here in just a little bit that make up our student leadership program. You'll hear a lot more about the program from the real stars of the show, though. In addition to education, we do advocacy. So we advocate for clean air, for clean water, for youth voices to be heard. We work with policymakers to protect the people and places of the watershed. We also do restoration. And I like to say that we like to get our hands dirty and wet, because not only do we work to restore the watershed by planting trees, we also work to grow oysters and building living shorelines, and ultimately trying to put as many of those best management practices on the land and in the water that protect our environment. And last, and always as a final resort, we litigate. So through litigation, we use the power of the judicial system to hold entities accountable and make sure their protections are in place to help save the bay. So through our four kind of arms, CBF is always working again to work to help save the bay. If you really want to learn a little bit more, I encourage you to kind of check out cbf.org. But thank you again so much for having us. And I really want to turn it over to Rebecca to kind of take us on the rest of our adventure today.
Again, my name is Rebecca Martin. I'm the Director of Education and Guest Experiences at Gunston Hall, and I am very happy to have the honor today to talk a little bit about Bills of Rights throughout history. What are these Bills of Rights and where did they come from? When George Mason and his fellows started noticing that Parliament and the King of England were doing what they thought of as infringing upon the rights of English subjects, their rights, they started to get really frustrated. They believed that as English subjects, they should be the inheritors of a great tradition of protections for individual rights from government overreach. And in those years before the American Revolution, they felt that the English government, the British government, just wasn't living up to its end of the bargain. So where did these ideas first come from? Well, one of the most important early documents is Magna Carta, the Great Charter of the 13th century, which said that no one is entirely above the law. In fact, the king is not entirely above the law. The king must follow laws and therefore is not able to wantonly or capriciously infringe upon the rights of other people. And then the English Bill of Rights of the late 17th century codified further rights such as the right to petition government, rights that had to do with trials, protections for property. And again, George Mason believed that these belonged to every English subject. So when he went to the 5th Virginia Convention to be with other people creating the government for Virginia, he was asked to help write a Declaration of Rights. And in fact, he became the primary author of this document. And in it, he wrote provisions that would help protect the government or help protect citizens from government overreach and corruption. His document, the Virginia Declaration of Rights, became a model for every other state constitution. And so his ideas ended up in every other state's constitution. He then went on to the US Constitutional Convention in 1787, and he took with him his ideas about protecting individual rights. So you can imagine how bitterly disappointed he was when his fellow delegates voted not to include a Bill of Rights in the national constitution. George went home. He started talking with all of the people he knew about why he hadn't signed the Constitution, that he thought that it lacked this critical document. And he was so persuasive that he was able to get people in other states to pay attention. And in fact, we have a document that is notes from a speech given at the Virginia ratifying convention, the Massachusetts ratifying convention for the Constitution, in which the speaker says, we cannot have a constitution such as this without a Bill of Rights. We must not ratify unless we get a Bill of Rights. Well, eventually George won. And in fact, not only did we get a Bill of Rights, but as a people, we are now so committed to the ideas of Bills of Rights that we have Bills of Rights for almost every kind of organization imaginable, where organizations use these documents, they write down these ideas to protect the interests of their constituents. I am thrilled that today we're going to be able to share one of the most recent Bills of Rights written, which is the Watershed Outdoor Bill of Rights written by the student leaders of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. And so we're now going to meet some of those student leaders. Do you introduce yourself, please?
Hello, I'm Claire Connor. I'm a freshman at Hickory High School in Chesapeake, Virginia.
Caitlin?
Hello, my name's Caitlin Leifler. I go to the Bryn Mawr School in Baltimore City, Maryland, and I'm a junior.
Annie?
Hello, my name is Annie Fang. I am a sophomore at Poolsville High School in Maryland.
And our last person.
Hi, I'm Emily Petrowski. I am a junior that goes to Broadneck High School. I live in Annapolis, Maryland.
Fantastic. Thank you. Oh, I forgot Eleanor, didn't I?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Eleanor Meckley. I'm a junior at Mechanicsburg Area Senior High School in PA.
Wonderful. We're so glad to have all of you with us. I'm wondering if one of you would be willing to help the people who are watching understand a little bit about the Student Leadership Program.
Yes, so the Student Leadership Program is basically, we are a group of environmentally driven high school students from across the DC, Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania region who are passionate about making a change in the watershed. And so CBF, Student Leadership, is basically an opportunity to get involved in the environment even at a young age, such as high school, and helps set you up for a future of engaging environmental action. And so CBF Student Leadership gives a way for youth advocacy, education, and action. It encourages all young students to work to protect our beautiful Chesapeake Bay. And if you or anybody you know is a high schooler from the Chesapeake Bay Watershed interested in joining our CBF Student Leadership Program, you can go to our CBF Student Leadership website to learn some more about this.
Great, thank you. So let's hear a little bit about the Bill of Rights that you created. What is this document?
So basically, our Watershed Outdoor Bill of Rights was drafted by student leaders from Chesapeake Bay Foundation this July 2020. And it's essentially just a list consisting of all the basic rights such as clean air and water that we as student leaders feel citizens in the Chesapeake Bay should possess. Although many people would automatically just assume that these are basic rights that everyone obviously has, many people do in fact not have access to these. And the intention of this bill that we drafted was to ensure that all residents in the watershed would be able to access the natural experiences, education, and enjoyment that they are entitled to as residents of our beautiful watershed.
Fantastic. So why is it important to have this kind of document?
So we thought it was important to write a Watershed Outdoor Bill of Rights for two main reasons. One, we wanted to start an environmental movement that has foundations in awareness and education. So even though a lot of people don't think of clean air and clean water as environmental rights, even though they are basic human rights, and we want to kind of change the narrative and mindset around that. The second one is we want to build off that education and awareness foundation with community action. We believe that the people that can make a lot of change are in communities that are most affected because they have powerful stories and experiences that they can tell to really create awareness around these issues. But besides those two key points, I think we started on this journey because we really wanted to address the systemic and historic inequalities and inequities that marginalized and indigenous peoples have faced. But what we really want to make sure through the implementation of this Watershed Outdoor Bill of Rights is that we do not speak in place of or instead of these peoples, because the reason that they are facing the environmental crises as they are now is because in the past they were silenced and they were not listened to. So the only way to move forward from the harm that those practices did is to amplify their voices, is to listen to them. But I also want to acknowledge the fact that we are by no means the first to identify these issues, and we are by no means the first to try to address these issues. There has been a lot of momentum behind environmental justice movements in the past decade or so, and we want to use this Watershed Outdoor Bill of Rights as further fuel on that movement and use it as a microphone to amplify the voices in those communities and those peoples.
That's fantastic. So are there any specific results that you're hoping will come from this project that you have undertaken? I am really impressed with the big picture things that you're thinking about. Do you have any specific outcomes that you are looking towards?
As Claire mentioned, we really want this Watershed Outdoor Bill of Rights to be something that the everyday person in this watershed can use to improve or even obtain the rights that we believe they should all have. Because the truth of the matter is that green spaces and natural places are not equitably distributed. Not every city has a central park, and not every suburban neighborhood is within walking distance from a natural waterway. So we really want everyone to be able to enjoy these natural wonders. And by referencing this Watershed Outdoor Bill of Rights, they can use that as a tool to obtain these rights. So specifically, this won't be like government legislation as of right now, but it will definitely be something that you all as citizens could use and reference.
I'm curious about how this project, this Bill of Rights, will help contribute to the overall mission of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. How does this Bill of Rights help preserve the watershed, and how does it help then save the bay?
I think it really highlights this mission by empowering people, right? So like, as I was saying, with community action, we want this to empower diverse voices from across the watershed to step up and to speak up about the issues that they're facing. So by empowering people, it will end result and influence the watershed and hopefully influence more people to go out and think about these issues on an everyday basis.
And to add to that, another way that it is embodying like CBF action is through education. The Watershed Outdoor Bill of Rights is also meant to inform all of you of the rights that we should all have access to. So for example, I did not like the outdoors at all until I was entering 9th grade. I thought like bugs and dirt were gross, and I was always afraid of trespassing, and I never really knew quite what I was able to do. But then I went camping for the first time, and wandering through the woods and seeing the dappled light illuminating the ground was just wonderful. And it opened my eyes to like the fact that nature is a wonderful place that was really relaxing and I wanted to spend more time in. And there are so many more people like me who might not realize just how great and healthy of a place it is to experience. And so another aspect is educating people that these are opportunities and ways to spend your time.
So Eleanor, you and Claire have both talked about empowering people or educating people, and I'm really interested in learning more from one of the two of you or from one of our other students about how are you planning to distribute the Watershed Bill of Rights? How will you let people know that it exists so that you'll be able to help other people get excited about it and to use it?
Yeah, so the first step is to spread the word through events like these. Thank you all for coming to this webinar. And aside from just spreading the word that this is something we're working on creating, we also want to get feedback to make sure that this is truly a document that represents all people. This was written by a niche group of hyper-environmentalist student leaders, so we want to make sure that we're getting input from other people, other stretches of the watershed as well. From there, we'd also like to get feedback from other environmentalist groups and maybe groups of people that celebrate Indigenous culture and other stuff to really get a diverse take on what these outdoor rights should be. And once we have it all finalized, we're going to send it to get approved by the CBF Board of Trustees. So it will be an official document that you can look and see on their website and further spread the word through events, speeches, press releases, and whatever else comes up.
Fantastic. So I'm really interested in the process that you have gone through to create this document, and I see that someone in our audience is interested in something similar. We have an audience question wondering, how long has it taken you to write what you have so far? So if someone might answer that, and then also maybe tell us a little bit about what was the general process you used for creating the document, that would be great.
Okay, so this process started all the way back in summer 2020 at one of our summer expeditions that student leaders attend. I was actually one of the student leaders that was there. We learned about what our area is going through with the lack of clean water, the lack of clean air, the things that we thought was just our rights, but we realized it wasn't, and not everybody thought the same. So we looked into the Children's Outdoor Bill of Rights in Baltimore and a couple others just around the area. And we realized that there was something we could do, that we could write this Bill of Rights to get people learn about what we think they should have and what they could open their eyes to see that they are entitled to. So it started by we looked into other ones, and then looked into our own areas and the issues that we were having in Maryland and Virginia and Pennsylvania and all the 6 states in the watershed. And from there, it sparked this interest in writing up this Bill of Rights so people could see what we see. Because even though we might just be a group of hyper-environmentalists, as Eleanor said, we think that if we told people what we see, they might see it too, and we can make that difference.
And just to add on to the process and answer the question a little bit, I don't think the process really has ended yet. This is still our draft and we're looking for input even now. But so during the process, as we were creating it in July, it was a little difficult reaching a consensus. And even still, we were working on it all till like November. And that was because there were some obvious differences in what all of like the student leaders wanted to see. And that makes sense because we're all spread out within the watershed, and the watershed makes up a pretty diverse and vast area of land and population. So we were all really passionate. I'll talk about the process a little bit. We were all really passionate about core goals like clean air and water, those like basic rights, but we each had a different method to accomplishing them that was unique to where we lived within the watershed. So as we were creating the Bill of Rights, someone in Virginia, for example, who lives like right on the water, they really cared about oysters and how they filter our water. And they wanted to see a right that would protect those oysters. While, for example, I lived in Baltimore City, I wanted to focus on trees instead because of the role they played in combating the heat island effect, which is very much an issue in Baltimore City. So, but even then with some of our divergent ideas, we did have like lots of similarities. And so that's how we were able to reach a consensus because, for example, Eleanor, who's on this call today, she lives in suburban Pennsylvania and really cared about trees as well, just like me. But she cared about them for the role they played in riparian buffers and filtering off runoff rather than the heat island effect exactly. So at the end of many discussions, edits, and tweaks that lasted all the way till now and is going to continue on to what like we each wanted to see in our Bill of Rights. In the end, we made sure that with our 10 rights, each resident within our diverse watershed was included and represented. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
That was really helpful. Thank you. Okay, so it sounds as if you've worked super hard to make sure that you've included the perspectives of all of the members of your group. You've also mentioned that that there's some uniformity in the interests and the goals of the people in the group, and that maybe there are people who don't share the same passion for environmental issues that you do. Have you thought about how might you get people who aren't as excited yet about these topics as you are? How might you get them involved or interested? How might you persuade other people about the importance of the ideas that you've included in your Watershed Outdoor Bill of Rights?
So actually, someone can definitely jump in and add on, but one of our rights that we included was access to environmental education, because we feel that the main reason we've had lots of exposure to, education surrounding the environment, or we've been able to go outside. We've had that privilege to go outside, explore, like Eleanor was saying earlier. But that's why we wanted to include environmental education, because we understand that not everyone has, we're not as much of a hyper environmentalist as Emily mentioned earlier. So that's why we included that specific right.
Does anyone have anything to add to that?
I can add something. I think on the topic of kind of getting people on board that might disagree with us, I think that most people here can agree with a lot of what we've put in our Bill of Rights. I don't think anyone wants polluted air or acidic waterways. A lot of the controversy comes from ways of dealing with that, and the best way to deal with some of these issues might be more of a state-by-state kind of case. So the Watershed Outdoor Bill of Rights is kind of designed to be vague enough that securing these rights is the priority, but it's up to individual areas how they achieve that right, because no place is quite the same, and different methods might be needed for different areas. As Caitlin mentioned earlier, some places need oysters in the water, and some streams need more trees by them. And of course, there's other ways as well. So it depends on where you are.
Just adding on even more, I think one of the ways that is the best way to get everyone involved is to include everyone, which is something we're trying to do. That's why this is still a draft. We haven't completed it because we're trying to get as much input as we can. We've offered it to our environmental clubs at our school. We've reached out to other people in CBF. We're reaching out right now, talking to all of you. We want everybody's stories and we want everybody's passions, because even if you're not extremely passionate about the environment, if we can talk to you and get what you're worried about or what you think is your right, then maybe we can get those people interested, because by talking to them.
I'm really impressed with everything that you all have done, and I'm really impressed with the process. I think it's hard to come to consensus. It's hard to create something that is like this document. And I think that the work that you've done, the way that you have thought hard about what's important to you, the way you've worked together to codify that in a document is awfully similar to the sorts of things that our founders did when they were trying to figure out what kind of world did they want to help create with our new governmental systems in the 1770s and 80s. And so I'm really impressed at the way that this document is follows from the traditions of the 18th century and yet really breaks new ground. So well done. I think it's super, super, super cool to see what you've done. And I think that people such as George Mason and other people who helped create our government institutions would be really impressed with everything that you have done. Bravo. We have just a moment more. Is there anything else that you wanted to share? Do you want to talk about anything that is coming up or anything else about the Bill of Rights?
So as we've mentioned a lot through this webinar, we really want this to represent a diverse set of people. And to do that, we want to seek as much input as we can. So at the end of this, there's going to be a survey in the chat, and we would really appreciate if you would just take a little bit of your time to fill that out, because we really want this to represent everyone. So if you could fill that out, that'd be great.
Wonderful. Thank you. And everyone should look for the link for that survey in just a moment. At Gunston Hall, we have a lot going on in the next few weeks and months. So we hope that we'll see some of you back for a program in January that looks at townhouses and country houses, comparing two patriots, one from Massachusetts, who lived in a beautiful townhouse, with George Mason living in the country in Virginia. So we'll be looking at Jeremiah Lee and George Mason and the ways that they both express their patriotism and what we can learn from their houses. Then I hope you'll join us in early February for Collecting Rights, where we're going to go behind the scenes at another museum. In this case, it's Winterthur Museum, Garden and Library, to learn a little bit about some objects that they have in their collection representing Black womanhood from the early 19th century. We have a program called Descent Made Material, where we're going to be looking at the stuff that we create, our clothing, the furnishings that we create, and the ways that we express our political ideas or our ideas about the world through the stuff that we make for ourselves. And that we'll look at that from a historical perspective from the 18th century through the 21st. So we hope to see you at some of those programs. We are so glad that you were able to join us today. And we look forward to continuing the conversation online. I know that we welcome comments on our Facebook page, and I am sure that the student leaders will look forward to getting all of your comments in the survey and also through social media for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Thank you to all of the student leaders for all of the hard work that you've been doing, and thank you for joining us this evening.